Welcome to Casual Politics, Alan Johnson. Thank you very much for accepting my request, and I'm very grateful to you. You need no introduction. You've been member of Parliament since 1997.
Yes.
It's been almost 20 years. How are you enjoying your time as member of Parliament, Alan Johnson?
I've enjoyed this job. I started out as a shelf stacker in Tesco's. Wanted to be a rock and roll star, but that might yet lay in the future. Always a postman, never too late. Was a postman, and then eventually leader of my trade union, general secretary. And I thought long and hard about making the switch into Parliament in the 90s, but I'm really glad I did. I enjoy the constituency side of being a member of Parliament, as well as the kind of wonderful privilege of being in Parliament.
When you first came to Parliament, it was in 1997, when Tony Blair won a landslide majority. And a few months ago, when you were re-elected, just a big disappointment for your party, was it?
It was, yes. But in a democracy, you have to be prepared. One day, your reign will end. We won 3 successive elections, and I think we did an awful lot of good things in those 13 years, not least of all, expanding the higher education population, introducing the education maintenance allowance, so that poorer kids could stay on at school and qualify to go to university. All those things were very important, and I think we left the country better educated, safer and healthier than when we came in 97. But eventually the country is going to put someone else into Parliament. That's the nature of a parliamentary democracy. And whilst I think some of the reasons why we took the rap, if you like, for what happened in the global financial services meltdown in 2010. Because we were in government at the time, there's a lot of myths about whether we created that situation or not. It was an international issue, and I think Gordon Brown stopped a recession becoming a depression, but that's another story. We lost in 2010, we lost again in 2015, and now I think the party has to get its act together, because if you stay too long out of power, then you begin to become a party that's not focused on things you can actually do to help people in your country, but you get focused too much on being a party of opposition and becoming a party of protest, and where we were formed to be a party of government.
But it seems that your party is getting torn apart. Is that true?
I don't think it's getting torn apart, no. I've been around 40 years. I remember the time when we really were being torn apart. No, we had a leadership election after a defeat, and I don't think we had a proper analysis of why we lost. Jeremy now has come in with the biggest mandate for any leader, at least since Tony Blair, and under one member, one vote. I think there's been an understandable feeling that during that long period of the election, the Tories are kind of up and running and we're still chasing their tail. But recently, Osborne's been forced to backtrack on tax credits. We're united on the question of the European Union, a campaign that I'm leading for Britain to remain in the European Union, and we've had a stunning victory in the Oldham and Royston by-election. So, I think this period's now coming to an end, and we start the new year with a much better chance of getting back to the kind of united and effective opposition that we can be and have to be if we're going to win back power.
But tax credits it was the peers who made him to make a U-turn on them, and not because does it justify that how weak the opposition is to hold the government to account?
Well, it's a good point. We don't have the numbers in the House of Commons. They have a majority of 12. I think what we did, we were the party that introduced tax credits, and what it showed is that we were involved in redistribution from the more prosperous to the needy, and it's become an essential element. It's one of those what economists call the automatic stabilizers. When the economy went rocky after Lehman Brothers collapse, it was tax credits that kicked in to keep people at a reasonable level of income. The untold story of tax credits in that period. And I think our effective opposition in the Commons actually led to the argument in the Lords about, this being totally destructive for people on low incomes who were working people. Now, the interesting thing about that was that it didn't have to go to the Lords if Osborne had put it in the finance bill. He took it out of the finance bill and made it a separate proposition, precisely because he was worried about the effect Labour would have on it for the Commons as a statutory instrument, yes. And then had the temerity to criticise the Lords for voting on it. Well, they wouldn't have had the right if it had been part of the finance bill, but he knew in the finance bill we could pick it to pieces at the committee stage. So I think it was very much a part of our campaign that led to the victory in the Lords and led to him doing a complete U-turn, the like of which I'd never seen before, with an applauding media. If that had happened with us, by the way, the media would have been absolutely, with 10p tax rate was a similar issue for Gordon Brown. We didn't get the same easy ride off of the media that George Osborne was.
You also mentioned Oldham West by-election, and some people, they were saying that your candidate, he didn't win because of Jeremy Corbyn. He won in spite of Jeremy Corbyn because he's a Blairite candidate, and he's a tremendous. He was a tremendous local councillor. So, do you agree with?
Well, I'm not really interested in picking over the intros. Why did we win? We won because you're quite right. He is an exceptional candidate. I mean, the people, anyone who went to Oldham and knocked on doors were amazed at the voter recognition of a council leader. Generally, if you're a leader of the council, it might count against you. For him, he'd done his job so superbly, was such a superb candidate, that was actually a plus. So we won, and we won because we had a good candidate. We won, no doubt, because we had more members on the ground, part of Jeremy Corbyn's election with a huge increase in membership. And UKIP must be very, very despondent, because that was a seat that in any normal circumstances an opposition party would have had a chance of taking at a by-election.
As you may know, I did Dennis Healy's last interview, and he told me that he was member of Parliament for 40 years, and it was very sad for you that 20 years of those 40 years he fought against his own party instead of fighting Tories, and that is happening at the moment. Is that sad for you to see it happening?
It's got to stop. I don't think it's happening. I don't think even Dennis would think that it was on the same level as the late 70s, early 80s, which is what this period reminds me of, but it's not a rerun, it's not militant, and it mustn't become militant. You're right, it mustn't become militant. Once we lose the sense of being a party of government, once we decide that the important thing is to change the party, not change the country, then we're condemned to repeat that history and go through the depressing period that Dennis Healy had to suffer, and many others, of Labour governments being short interludes in Conservative rule. We hadn't even won 2 successive terms of government until Tony Blair did it in '97.
And so, do you think that Jeremy Corbyn he should stop supporting Momentum and stop the World Coalition because they're toxic for your party?
Yes, I think as leader, on reflection, Jeremy needs to act like a leader, and leaders do not get attached to fringe groups, especially a fringe group, Stop the War, that likened ISIL to the international brigade of socialists and trade unionists that went and fought against fascism in Spain. I mean, that was a ludicrous comment to make. And the Momentum are people that have detested the Labour Party for most of their political life. We don't want them anywhere near us. Let them stand on their own platform, not try to take over Labour's platform, which is what militant was all about, entryism. And if entryism rears its head again, we'll become totally unreactive.
And Jeremy Corbyn is talking now about the gentler and the kinder politics. What does he mean by gentler and kinder politics?
Well, I think that reflects Jeremy. I've known him in the 18 years I've been in Parliament. He's a gentle, kind person. But it's one thing saying that's the kind of politics you want, and condemning, as he has done, the people who are using him as a kind of vehicle to say the whole everything that Labour ever did in the past was rubbish, and therefore anyone associated with it needs to be removed, and it has to be a kind of hard left party that could not possibly win public support. In fact, they have a contempt, call it bourgeois democracy. So Jeremy wants a gentler kind of politics. His supporters are not displaying the same kind of commitment.
Over the
to a gentler
in
kind of
Syria,
politics.
they have threatened some of the, your colleagues to. Yeah.
That's what they're dealing. That's what, you know, they are interested in disputes on the left being more holier than thou, on the left being more left-wing than anyone else, no one to the left of us. That's the kind of things they engage in. And it's you know, it does not represent working people, it doesn't represent trade unions. And that's why Labour Party should have nothing to do with that. That's why leadership have nothing
Are you
to
in
do.
favour of a consensus politics that Labour Party should follow?
Yes, we have our principles and our values. We are about eradicating poverty and greater equality. We are a democratic party. We are a party of democratic socialists. That's what it says in Clause 4. It didn't say it before, by the way. It didn't mention socialism, but the revised Clause 4 say that. What we did on pensioner poverty, on putting children out of poverty, on introducing a national minimum wage, rights to union recognition, all of that was consistent with our principles in government. We do not go down the road of what Clem Attlee called doctrinaire impossibilism. Set down impossible goals and then condemn the party for not achieving them. The culture of betrayal. That's historically been something that Labour has had to defeat and face down and escape from, and we've got to do that now.
And my last two questions. The first one is of your campaign that you're leading. Is it a cross-party led campaign?
No, it's a Labour Party campaign. So there is a cross-party umbrella campaign, and we wish them well to remain in Europe. There's an umbrella campaign to stay out.
Peter Mandelson,
Peter Mandelson's involved with it. Many of our
together.
Labour activists are involved in that. But my view was that we needed a distinctive Labour Party campaign that is separate from that, that uses the whole of the party's machine, our knowledge of where our support is, our contact creator technology, and our troops on the ground. We need to run a separate campaign. We'll be focusing more on the social dimension of Europe probably than some of the other campaigns.
And are you in favour of 16 years old to participate in that referendum? Because they could get married at the age of 16 and they could even pay taxes. So why then they can't?
As I almost did. You can get married at 16, but you need your parents' permission. But because this is about such a profoundly important issue for the future, I think there is a good argument, as there was in the Scottish referendum on independence, a good argument for including 16, 17-year-olds. As we speak, it's just been defeated again in the Commons. And as I understand it, the government have attached a finance element to it which would prevent the Lords from sending it back again. So I think that's probably an argument that's been lost.
And my last question, and as I know that when you were young, my age, you wanted to become a rock star. On my way, I bumped into Brian May and the other day Bob Geldof. Is it a good news to you that more musicians are getting involved in politics?
It's a good thing for
Is it more engaging?
Everyone to get involved in politics. I think Brian and Bob Geldof are probably not far off my age as well. I think music has a political dimension, and artists like Elvis Costello, Billy Bragg, Bob Dylan have made powerful messages through their music. I think it's a completely different thing. I'm not sure whether
Bob Dylan.
Elvis was, but I don't know what Bob Dylan was. But anyway, they made arguments through their music relevant to the times. I'm doubtful whether pop stars, because they are pop stars, can persuade anyone to a political point of view through just because they support one political party. They can do it through their music, you listen to Elvis Costello's Shipbuilding, you'll see a subtle and devastating anti-Falklands War is what he wrote it about, but that was done beautifully in music. Elvis Costello doesn't need to come on stage and say, I support this political party or that political party. He can leave it to his music to make his statement forward.
It was a great pleasure, Alan Johnson. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.